Mysticism is often treated as religion, belief, or private experience. The model of mysticism takes a different approach. It asks what changes structurally inside consciousness. Across Christian, Sufi, Advaita, Buddhist, Taoist, and Neoplatonic traditions, the same pattern appears. Attention stabilizes. Identity becomes less defensive. Emotion softens. Cognition quiets. The body releases contraction. Symbols become flexible. And awareness becomes more direct. This is not theological synthesis. It is structural comparison. For management, this matters because many crises begin in constricted interpretation, ego defense, overreaction, symbolic rigidity, and cognitive escalation. The model of mysticism offers a vocabulary of interior stabilization, not spirituality for management, but reflective discipline, ethical restraint, and clearer decision-making. Philosophical Intelligence Institute. A discipline, not a trend. A framework, not an opinion.
Mystical traditions appear across nearly every major civilization. Christian contemplatives speak of union with God. Sufi poets speak of divine love and longing. Advaita Vedanta speaks of non-dual realization. Zen Buddhism speaks of awakening to emptiness. Taoism speaks of harmony with the Tao. Neoplatonism speaks of return to the One. Kabbalah speaks of the infinite. Sikh mysticism speaks of remembrance and divine unity. Kashmir Shaivism speaks of consciousness recognizing itself. At first glance, these traditions appear too different to compare. Their doctrines differ. Their symbols differ. Their languages differ. Their metaphysical assumptions differ. One tradition speaks of God, another speaks of emptiness, another speaks of Brahman, another speaks of the Tao, another speaks of the One. And this creates a problem. If we compare mystical traditions only at the level of doctrine, they appear incompatible. But if we say they're all simply the same, we erase their real differences. The comparative architecture of mysticism offers a different approach. It does not claim that all mystical traditions teach the same thing. It does not reduce Christianity, Sufism, Buddhism, Taoism, Kabbalah, or Advaita Vedanta into one universal doctrine. Instead, it asks a more precise question. Do mystical traditions share a structural architecture? Do they organize the transformation of consciousness through recurring functions? The answer proposed by the model of mysticism is yes. Mystical traditions can be understood as structured systems of interior inquiry. They organize how human beings approach ultimate reality. They provide pathways of practice. They use symbols to mediate what cannot be easily expressed. They describe transformed modes of experience. They connect insight with ethical change. They develop special forms of language, and they orient the practitioner toward a final aim or resolution. This gives us 7 analytic functions. First, the ontological source. Every mystical tradition begins with some orientation towards ultimate reality. This may be called God, Brahman, emptiness, the Tao, the One, the infinite, divine presence, cosmic order, or the depth of consciousness itself. The names differ. The metaphysics differ. But structurally, this source gives the path its horizon. Second, the epistemic pathway. Mystical traditions do not usually treat transformation as ordinary information. They require practice, prayer, meditation, contemplation, remembrance, self-inquiry, silence, disciplined attention, philosophical reflection. The pathway reorganizes perception. It changes how the practitioner knows. Third, symbolic mediation. Mysticism does not operate through direct experience alone. It uses symbols, metaphors, sacred names, diagrams, rituals, stories, paradoxes, and poetic images. These symbolic systems do not simply decorate mystical experience. They make experience intelligible. They provide the bridge between the ineffable and the interpretable. Fourth, experiential mode. Mystical traditions describe transformed states of awareness. Union, awakening, stillness, emptiness, presence, recognition, interior clarity. The details differ, but in each case the ordinary structure of experience is altered. The practitioner no longer relates to reality in the usual way. Fifth, ethical verification. Mystical traditions rarely treat experience alone as sufficient. Transformation must become visible in life. Humility, compassion, detachment, love, discipline, service, restraint. Ethical transformation verifies that the experience has been integrated rather than merely consumed as an extraordinary state. Sixth, linguistic and semiotic form. Mystical traditions developed unusual forms of language. They use paradox, negation, poetry, silence, apophatic language, symbolic density. This is not because mystical language is irrational. It is because ordinary language becomes strained when it tries to describe what exceeds ordinary conceptual categories.
Seventh, ultimate aim or resolution. Every path has a final orientation. Union with God, liberation from illusion, awakening to emptiness, harmony with the Tao, return to the One, integration of the psyche, rational freedom, clarified experience. Here the differences between traditions become most visible. The structure may recur, but the final interpretation differs. This is the central insight of the comparative architecture of mysticism. Vistapro traditions are not identical, but they are not incomparable either. They can be studied as architectures of interior transformation. This approach avoids two errors. The first error is reduction. It does not say that all mysticism is really the same experience beneath different words. The second error is fragmentation. It does not say that every tradition is so culturally separate that comparison becomes impossible. Instead, it offers a structural middle path. Doctrine remains distinct. Symbol remains distinct. History remains distinct. But the architecture of transformation can still be compared. This also allows the study of mysticism to expand beyond conventional religious categories. Stoicism, phenomenology, and depth psychology are not mystical traditions in the same sense as Christian mysticism or Sufism. But they also explore disciplined attention, interior transformation, symbolic interpretation, ethical formation, and the restructuring of experience. They belong to the wider landscape of interior inquiry. This is why mysticism matters philosophically. Mysticism is not merely a private religious phenomenon. It is one of humanity's oldest and most sophisticated attempts to understand the inner life. It asks how consciousness is transformed, how meaning is mediated, how symbols reshape experience, how ethical life verifies insight, and how language reaches its limit when it confronts the deepest dimensions of awareness. The comparative architecture of mysticism does not replace the traditions it studies. It does not stand above them as a new doctrine. It provides a map, a framework, a disciplined way of comparing without flattening, a way of seeing the hidden architecture behind diverse forms of interior transformation. Because the question is not only what mystics believe. The deeper question is how traditions structure the path by which human beings encounter, interpret, and transform the inner life. That is the comparative architecture of mysticism. Not one doctrine, not one experience, but a structural field of interior inquiry, a way of studying how consciousness, meaning, symbol, discipline, ethics, and language converge at the limits of ordinary understanding. Philosophical Intelligence Institute, a discipline, not a trend, a framework, not an opinion.